Royals have posed for a new formal photograph. Of course, your eye is drawn to the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate Middleton. You notice there, she's the only splash of color in this picture. But take a close look at her tiara.
The camera was meant to capture royal elegance, but one brief moment changed the mood. Catherine, Princess of Wales, entered wearing a tiara linked to the late Queen's legacy, and as Queen Camilla looked on, viewers began asking whether they had witnessed admiration, unease, or the first sign of something deeper. At first, the scene looked exactly like the kind of royal occasion Buckingham Palace knows how to stage: state guests, cameras, and an atmosphere designed to project confidence to the world. King Charles III stood at the center of ceremony, Queen Camilla carried the dignity of the current reign, and everything appeared to be another managed display of British royal tradition. Yet the most powerful moment did not come from a toast or official announcement. It came when Catherine entered the room. That entrance mattered because royal jewels speak in a language older than modern public relations. When a senior royal woman wears a historic tiara, she is not simply choosing an accessory. She is stepping into a line of memory, carrying associations of duty, inheritance, loss, triumph, and rank. And when that jewel is connected in public imagination to Queen Elizabeth II, the emotional weight becomes even heavier. That is why the camera seemed to find more than beauty. They found symbolism. Catherine, calm and measured, appeared not as someone chasing attention, but as someone being quietly wrapped in the visual language of the monarchy's future. For many viewers, her entrance felt like a bridge between the late Queen's long reign and the era that will one day belong to Prince William, the Prince of Wales. It was a moment of elegance, but also of succession, continuity, and quiet royal power. Then came the detail that sent royal watchers into discussion. Footage appeared to show Camilla reacting as Catherine entered. The moment was brief, and Buckingham Palace has not publicly explained it. No one outside the room can honestly say what Camilla thought or felt in that instant. A camera can exaggerate a pause, flatten a facial expression, or turn an ordinary glance into a mystery. But the reaction was replayed because the image touched something larger than one expression. It placed two royal women into the same frame at a moment when their meanings were very different. Camilla is queen beside Charles now, with the title, duty, and public position that come with the current reign. Catherine is not queen yet, but her future is already present in the way people watch her. One woman represents the complicated path that brought Charles to this chapter. The other represents the next chapter many people are already imagining. And between them was a tiara heavy with memory. That is where the tension begins. Was Camilla simply observing Catherine's entrance with normal attention? Was she admiring the jewel? Was she registering how strongly the room had shifted toward the Princess of Wales? Or did viewers read their own understanding of royal history into a moment that may have been far simpler in reality? The palace has given no answer, and perhaps it never will. But royal stories grow because the public senses a deeper question beneath the surface. In this case, the deeper question is about who now carries the late Queen's legacy most convincingly. Charles inherited the crown. Camilla stands beside him. William is the future king. But Catherine has become one of the clearest emotional links between the monarchy's past and its next public image. She wears tradition in a way that feels restrained rather than forced. She appears in historic jewels without seeming overwhelmed by them. And after her period away from public life, every formal return carries a new emotional resonance. This is why her appearance felt so significant. The Princess of Wales has not returned to royal duty with loud declarations. She has returned carefully, selectively, and with a sense of quiet control. She is no longer seen only as elegant or dutiful. She is increasingly seen as resilient, and resilience has become one of the monarchy's most valuable qualities in a period marked by uncertainty, health concerns, and transition. That trust is the first real layer of conflict in this story. If Catherine is allowed to wear pieces strongly associated with the late Queen, what message does that send? It may simply say that she is a senior royal fulfilling a formal role at a grand event. But to many observers, it says more. It suggests that the monarchy is gradually teaching the public to see her as the keeper of continuity, the woman who can carry old symbols into a new reign without breaking their meaning. For Camilla, that symbolism is delicate. Her official position is secure, and it would be unfair to suggest otherwise. She has spent years working within the royal family and now performs her duties beside the king. But public emotion does not always move in the same direction as official rank. Some symbols attach themselves to memory more than to title. The late Queen's world, Diana's shadow, and Catherine's future all meet in a way that can make any shared royal scene feel charged. That does not require hostility. It does not require a confrontation. The power lies in the visual contrast itself. A current queen watching a future queen enter beneath the weight of royal memory is enough to make people pause. In monarchy, even a pause can become a story, and this is why the moment matters beyond the evening. It revealed how quickly Catherine's symbolic role is expanding. She does not need to dominate a room to become its emotional center. The symbols around her do much of that work. The tiara, the setting, the memory of the late queen, the presence of William, and the watching eyes of the world all combined to create an image that felt larger than ceremony. Was this simply one beautiful royal appearance, or was something larger beginning to shift? That question is why viewers kept replaying the footage. The answer may not lie in Camilla's face alone. It may lie in the fact that so many people were ready to believe the moment meant something. That readiness tells us that the monarchy's future is no longer distant in the public imagination. It is entering rooms, wearing historic jewels, and quietly changing how every other figure is seen. So the first chapter of the story is not about accusing anyone of hidden motives. It is about understanding the silent language of royal power. It is about how one tiara can bring the late queen's memory back into the room, how one entrance can shift attention, and how one captured glance can open a much larger conversation about loyalty, legacy, and succession. Because if Catherine's appearance truly carried the weight viewers sensed, then the most important question is not what Camilla looked like in that second. It is why the room seemed to change when Catherine walked in, and what that change may reveal about the future shape of the monarchy itself. Because if Catherine is becoming the figure through whom the monarchy asks the public to trust its future, then the tiara was never only a jewel. It became a signal of where confidence is beginning to gather. Not confidence declared in a palace statement, but the kind that appears when an institution allows one person to carry symbols that millions already understand. That is why the moment had consequences beyond the camera clip. A royal jewel connected to the late queen does not simply reflect the past. It asks who has the discipline to carry that past forward. For Catherine, that question has become central to her public role. She is not being watched only as William's wife or as a senior working royal. She is being watched as a future queen whose every appearance helps the public imagine the next reign before it begins. This is where the story deepens. The monarchy does not prepare the public for change through one dramatic announcement. It does it slowly, through repeated images, a place beside William, a careful return to duty, a historic jewel chosen for a formal evening, a calm expression beneath the weight of ceremony. Each image adds another layer until the public begins to understand the message without anyone inside the palace having to say it aloud. But that silent method carries risk. When the future is shown too clearly, the present can begin to look unsettled. Charles must remain the center of the crown, and Camilla must continue to stand beside him with visible dignity. Yet Catherine's symbolism now reaches into a different emotional space. It is not about replacing the current reign. It is about reminding people that the monarchy has somewhere to go after it. For Camilla, the difficulty is not simply that Catherine looks significant. The difficulty is that Catherine's significance feels rooted in memories many people already cherish. The late Queen's reign still carries deep emotional authority. Diana's story still lives in the public imagination. William's future is already understood. When Catherine wears a tiara connected to that world, viewers bring decades of royal memory with them. This is why some observers focused on Camilla's brief reaction. It may have been nothing more than a natural glance, and no one should claim to know her private thoughts. But the public interest reveals something important. People were not only looking for tension between two royal women. If Catherine's rise benefits anyone first, it benefits the monarchy itself, because the crown is always searching for figures who can make continuity feel natural rather than forced. Palace statements can explain duty, but they cannot create public trust on command. Trust gathers around people who appear steady when the atmosphere is uncertain, and that is why Catherine's symbolism has become so valuable. Yet that value does not sit in isolation. When one figure becomes the clearest emotional bridge to the future, everyone around that figure is pulled into a new arrangement. William gains strength because the public can imagine his reign through the calm partnership beside him. Charles gains reassurance because the next chapter appears prepared, not improvised. But Camilla faces a more complicated comparison, not because her title has changed, but because the audience now reads different kinds of royal legitimacy through different women. This is the hidden dynamic behind the tiara moment. The palace may have intended a formal, elegant appearance, but the public interpreted a transfer of emotional meaning. That does not mean a transfer of power has occurred, and it does not prove any private conflict. It means the image seemed to confirm something already forming in the public mind. Catherine is becoming one of the safest faces of royal continuity. But was this really about one royal evening, or was it part of a longer pattern? Catherine's public role has been built gradually, almost carefully enough that the full change is easy to miss. Over time, she became a working royal, then the mother of children in the direct line of succession, then Princess of Wales, and now, after personal difficulty and a measured return, she appears to many as the figure who can soften the monarchy's future without weakening its authority. That journey gives her a kind of credibility no tiara alone could create. Jewels can elevate a person visually, but they cannot create trust where none exists. If Catherine's appearance carried weight, it was because the public had already accepted the deeper story surrounding her: patience, family, endurance, restraint, and a refusal to turn royal pressure into spectacle. The tiara simply made that story visible in one concentrated image. This is where Camilla's position becomes more sensitive. Her path to the throne beside Charles was never simple, and public memory has not forgotten the emotional history attached to it. She has worked steadily, but her symbolism remains tied to the current reign and to a past the monarchy has had to carefully manage. Catherine, by contrast, is tied to anticipation. The public looks at her and thinks forward. That difference changes the emotional temperature whenever both women appear near the same symbols. They were looking for evidence of a larger transition, a moment when the future seemed to enter the room with such force that the present had to acknowledge it. And if that interpretation is correct, then the palace faces a delicate challenge. How does it allow Catherine to carry the late Queen's visual legacy without making Camilla appear less central? How does it celebrate continuity through the Princess of Wales without turning every appearance into a comparison? How does it prepare the country for William's future reign without making Charles's reign feel like a temporary bridge? These questions matter because royal power is built as much through perception as through protocol. Titles explain rank, but symbols shape feeling. Camilla may hold the official role of queen, but Catherine increasingly holds the emotional role of future continuity. Those two positions can coexist, but they create different kinds of attention. One is tied to the current order. The other is tied to anticipation. And anticipation, in monarchy, can be difficult to contain. That is why the tiara's history matters so much. It carried the aura of women who shaped the crown through different kinds of strength. The late Queen's strength was endurance. Diana's strength was emotional connection. Catherine's strength, at least in the public mind, appears to be controlled resilience. When those meanings meet in one jewel, the person wearing it becomes more than herself. She becomes a point where royal memory gathers. This can be a gift to the monarchy, because Catherine reassures viewers who worry about the institution's future. She gives the next reign a familiar face and makes tradition feel less distant, because she wears it with restraint rather than theatricality. But the same gift can become a burden. The more the public sees her as a symbol of stability, the less room she has to appear ordinary, tired, uncertain, or simply human. This is where William becomes central to the story. His presence near Catherine is structural as much as affectionate. He frames her symbolism within partnership, reminding viewers that the future monarchy will not rest on her alone. When he stands beside her during intense attention, the image becomes less about one woman carrying history and more about a royal couple preparing to carry duty together. Still, the public often reads the image before it reads the structure. The camera captures the tiara first, then the face, then the reaction nearby. The footage appeared, people replayed it, and the conversation quickly moved from fashion to succession, from beauty to power, from one royal glance to the future image of the monarchy. Was this really about personal feeling, or was the institution quietly protecting itself? Perhaps it was both. Catherine's connection to the late Queen's jewels may be rooted in tradition, but tradition can also be strategy. When the monarchy places historic symbols on a figure the public already trusts, it strengthens continuity without needing to argue for it. But that preparation affects everyone around her. Charles must manage the rise of the Wales family while maintaining authority in his own reign. Camilla must occupy her place beside the king while public imagination increasingly looks toward Catherine. William must allow his wife's symbolism to grow while protecting her from becoming overwhelmed by it. And Catherine herself must move through each appearance knowing that every jewel, entrance, and expression will be studied for meaning. That is why the situation is much larger than it first appeared. The captured moment was not important because it proved hidden conflict. It was important because it revealed how ready the public is to see Catherine as the monarchy's future guardian of memory. Whether Camilla's reaction meant anything or nothing, the audience's reaction meant a great deal. It showed that the symbols around Catherine now carry enough force to reshape the conversation all by themselves. And once that possibility became clear, the story moved into a more sensitive place. Because behind the visible beauty of the tiara, another issue was beginning to emerge. If Catherine is becoming the crown's most trusted symbol of continuity, who benefits from that rise, who is unsettled by it, and how far will the palace allow that symbolism to go before it changes the balance around everyone else? Some royal commentators may argue that this is why the palace must be cautious. If Catherine is too visibly associated with the late Queen's legacy, it can make the future feel more compelling than the present. If Camilla is positioned too defensively, it can make the present feel insecure. If Charles appears to lean too much toward the Wales image, people may wonder whether his reign is preparing to hand emotional authority onward before the formal moment arrives. The most striking contradiction is that Catherine's power often appears strongest when she does the least. She does not need to push into the center because the symbols around her draw attention on their own. She does not need to make a claim because her future role is already understood. Silence, in her case, often reinforces dignity. That is useful for the monarchy, but it may also encourage the palace to use her stillness as a stabilizing force. And that raises a question with long-term consequences. How much can one person be asked to symbolize before the symbolism becomes a burden? Royal women have often been asked to appear graceful, loyal, maternal, diplomatic, traditional, modern, and silent all at once. Catherine's calm may make that expectation look manageable, but calmness should not be mistaken for ease. William's role, therefore, becomes essential. He is the person most responsible for ensuring that Catherine's growing symbolic importance does not isolate her. When he stands close to her at major events, the image suggests protection, partnership, and shared responsibility. It reminds viewers that the future monarchy is not being built around one woman alone, but around a family structure that must hold under extraordinary attention. But there is danger in making the future too visible too soon. Charles must still carry his own reign with authority. Camilla must occupy her role without every image becoming a comparison. The Wales family must be prepared without appearing to overshadow. And the palace must manage all of this in an age when every clip is slowed down, replayed, and interpreted before the official photographs have even settled. That is why the camera moment became so useful to those trying to understand the deeper palace balance. Whether Camilla's expression meant anything privately is impossible to know. But publicly, it became a screen onto which viewers projected a larger royal question. Is the emotional center of the monarchy moving? If Catherine can enter a room and draw the late Queen's memory, William's future, and public sympathy into one frame, then her influence is no longer only ceremonial. It is narrative power. If Catherine reassures the public most naturally, then advisors must decide how often to place her at the center. Too little visibility may waste one of the monarchy's strongest assets. Too much visibility may increase pressure on her and make the current reign appear secondary. The balance is narrow, and every tiara appearance narrows it further. Behind the scenes, that reality may influence decisions the audience never sees, which historic pieces are offered, which state occasions Catherine attends, how closely William stands, how Camilla is positioned, and how Charles balances the present reign with the visible future. These choices may look ceremonial, but they are acts of narrative management. They tell the public where to place its confidence And if palace observers are right, the most important shift is not that Catherine wore a sacred tiara. It is that the public already understood why she could. The trust had been built before the jewel appeared. The jewel merely confirmed it. That is why the moment felt less like a surprise and more like a revelation of something already quietly decided in the public imagination. But even that did not explain the most sensitive part of the story. Because once Catherine's symbolic authority becomes strong enough to shape public perception, the next question is not whether she can carry the monarchy's future. It is whether everyone around her can accept the consequences of how clearly the public now sees that future taking shape. If everyone around Catherine can now see how clearly the public imagines the future, then the pressure is no longer hidden. It becomes part of every entrance, every camera angle, every historic jewel, and every expression caught for even a second. The palace may intend order, but the audience now watches for movement. That is where the story begins to accelerate. What started as discussion about Camilla's face on camera quickly became a public test of royal positioning. If Catherine enters wearing a tiara linked to the late queen, and the emotional center of the room appears to move with her, then the monarchy has to confront a difficult reality. Its future image may already feel stronger than some parts of its present one. That does not mean any formal role has changed. It does not mean Camilla has been pushed aside, and it does not prove Buckingham Palace arranged the evening as a message. The careful reading is that royal symbolism has reached a point where ordinary ceremony can produce extraordinary interpretation. But interpretation matters because monarchy survives partly through what people believe they are seeing. For Charles, this creates a demanding balance. He must remain the steady center of the current reign, while allowing William and Catherine to appear prepared enough to reassure the public. If the future is hidden too completely, the crown looks uncertain. If the future is displayed too strongly, the present can look weakened. Catherine's tiara moment made that narrow road visible. The king's challenge is emotional as much as ceremonial. The monarchy needs the public to feel that his reign has authority, while also believing the next reign has continuity. When Catherine becomes the figure through whom people read the late Queen's memory and William's future, Charles gains reassurance for the institution, yet he also faces the reminder that public affection is already looking ahead. Camilla's position becomes more delicate inside that frame. Her title is clear, her role is official, and she has carried her duties beside Charles with composure. But the camera moment showed how quickly public focus can move away from rank and toward symbolism. If viewers sense that Catherine carries the emotional inheritance of the crown more naturally, then Camilla's place becomes subject to comparison, whether that comparison is fair or not. A royal woman can be secure in rank and still vulnerable in perception. Camilla stands beside the king, but Catherine increasingly stands beside the public's idea of what comes next. Those are not the same kinds of power. One is immediate and ceremonial. The other is emotional and anticipatory. In a modern monarchy, both matter. This is why palace advisors, if they were watching closely, would likely see a warning about visual hierarchy. Which tiara Catherine wears next, where Camilla stands, how William frames his wife's presence, and how Charles balances his household will all carry new weight. The room can no longer be staged as though viewers are not studying every inch of it. The strongest turning point is that Catherine's symbolism now affects everyone else's image. Her presence strengthens William because it gives his future reign emotional credibility. It strengthens the monarchy because she connects old tradition to modern public trust. But it complicates Camilla's visibility because any moment involving the late Queen's jewels can remind viewers which royal woman feels most connected to continuity. There is also pressure on Catherine herself. Public admiration can become a demand. The more she appears as the calm bridge between past and future, the more people expect her to carry that role without strain. A tiara may project strength, but it also draws attention, and attention becomes heavy when every gesture is treated as history. William's quiet role therefore matters deeply. He is not only the heir beside his wife. He is the person who must help protect the future image being built around her. The stronger Catherine becomes as a symbol, the more important it is that she is not left alone beneath that symbolism. The future monarchy must look like a partnership, not a burden placed on one woman's shoulders. History offers a warning here. The royal family has seen before how quickly admiration for a Princess of Wales can become pressure, and how easily public love can turn into expectation. Catherine's path is different, more restrained and carefully managed, but the lesson remains. When the public invests too much meaning in one woman, the institution must be careful not to exploit that trust. Was this simply a reaction to one royal appearance, or was it part of a wider recalibration? If Catherine continues to appear in historic jewels connected to the late Queen's world, observers will see a pattern. If Camilla is positioned more prominently afterward, observers will see a response. If William remains visibly protective, observers will read strategy. Every future image now has the potential to become evidence. The risk is that the monarchy may accidentally create the comparison it wishes to avoid. It wants Catherine to reassure the public, but not overshadow Camilla. It wants William's future to feel secure, but not make Charles's reign feel temporary. It wants the late Queen's legacy to continue, but not turn every jewel into a silent contest over who inherits her emotional authority. For Camilla, the difficult part is that there is no direct answer to symbolism. She cannot argue with a tiara. She cannot publicly explain a glance. She cannot stop people from comparing her journey to Catherine's future. All she can do is continue performing her role with dignity, hoping consistency speaks louder than speculation. For Catherine, the danger is different. Her challenge is not proving she belongs. Increasingly, the public believes she does. Her challenge is surviving what belonging now demands. The tiara may have confirmed trust, but trust inside monarchy is never light. It brings duties, expectations, and the constant need to appear effortless while carrying a role that is anything but effortless. The story is no longer about whether Camilla was caught in an awkward second. It is about what that second allowed the public to see. Catherine's symbolic power has grown to the point where a single entrance can rearrange the emotional meaning of a room. And when that happens, the palace must decide whether to lean into the future being formed around her or slow the pace before the comparison becomes impossible to contain. Because the real consequence was not only what happened when Catherine walked in wearing the late Queen's sacred tiara. It was what the moment appeared to reveal about the monarchy's next phase, that the future is now visible, emotionally persuasive, and already reshaping the people around it. But even then, one question remained unanswered, and it could define the entire story. The question is whether the monarchy can allow Catherine's symbolic rise to continue naturally, or whether it must begin managing it more carefully before the contrast around her becomes too sharp. Because what happened in that room, whether read as a simple royal moment or as something more revealing, showed how quickly public attention now gathers around the future. That is the broader meaning of the story. The monarchy is no longer only asking people to respect the crown as an institution. It is asking them to believe in the people who will carry it next. In earlier generations, rank itself could command attention. Today, attention is earned through trust, consistency, emotional intelligence, and the ability to make tradition feel alive rather than distant. Catherine has become powerful because she seems to do exactly that. This does not mean the present reign is weakened, and it does not mean Camilla's position has lost its official weight. The careful conclusion is more subtle. Charles and Camilla still represent the monarchy as it exists today, but William and Catherine increasingly represent the monarchy as the public imagines it tomorrow. The camera moment mattered because it appeared to bring those two realities into the same frame, and for a second, the future seemed to carry the stronger emotional pull. That is why the tiara became so important. It was not simply a beautiful object from the royal collection. It became a test of meaning. On Camilla, a historic jewel confirms rank and royal recognition. On Catherine, it suggests inheritance, preparation, and continuity beyond the current reign. The same diamonds can tell different stories depending on who wears them, and the palace knows those stories can shape perception for years. Some observers will continue to say the discussion has been exaggerated. They may be right in one important sense. A single expression cannot prove hidden rivalry. A brief camera angle cannot expose private motives. Buckingham Palace has not confirmed tension, and responsible commentary must leave room for ordinary explanations. The audience may have turned it into something larger because royal symbolism invites that kind of reading. But even if the interpretation around Camilla's reaction is uncertain, the public response is not. People reacted because the image felt believable within the larger royal landscape. They understood why Catherine, wearing the late Queen's sacred tiara, could feel consequential, why Camilla's presence in the same frame could feel complicated, and why the next reign is no longer hidden behind the horizon. This is where the long-term consequence begins. Every future appearance by Catherine will now carry another layer of expectation. If she wears a historic tiara again, people will ask what message the palace is sending. If she appears at Charles's side, people will ask whether the king is elevating the Wales family. If she is held back from certain moments, people may wonder whether the institution is trying to slow the symbolism around her. For William, this makes Catherine's role both a strength and a responsibility. Her public trust supports his future reign before he has even reached the throne. She gives his kingship an emotional shape people can already recognize. But that same affection means he must guard the balance carefully. If Catherine becomes too heavily loaded with expectation, the warmth around her could become pressure, one of the hidden costs of royal life. For Charles, the lesson is different. His reign must allow the future to develop without seeming overshadowed by it. That requires a discipline few institutions manage well, to prepare succession openly enough to reassure people, but quietly enough to preserve the authority of the present. Catherine's tiara appearance reminded viewers that this balance is already being tested. The future can be introduced gently, but once people recognize it, they do not easily stop looking at it. For Camilla, the path forward may depend on dignity rather than control. She cannot change the public's emotional memory of the late queen, nor can she erase the affection attached to Catherine's future role. What she can do is continue to represent the current reign with steadiness, allowing her position to rest on service rather than comparison. That may be the only answer to a form of symbolism that cannot be argued with directly. And for Catherine, the deeper truth is that her greatest power may also be her greatest burden. She appears to carry history gracefully, but history is not light. The more people see her as the bridge between the late queen's example and the future crown, the more they will ask of her silence, her composure, her presence, and even her absences. A tiara can place someone in the line of legacy, but it can also make the expectations around that person difficult to escape. That is why the story was never only about one reaction. It was about the monarchy discovering, perhaps in real time, how much meaning now travels with Catherine before she even speaks. It was about the public recognizing that the next chapter of the crown may already have an image, a tone, and a face. And it was about the delicate unease that appears when the future begins to look more emotionally settled than the present. Royal observers will keep watching because the next signs will not come through dramatic announcements. They will come through placement, jewelry, ceremonies, portraits, and the quiet choreography of family hierarchy. They will watch whether Catherine is given more visible symbols of continuity. They will watch whether William steps further into the frame beside her. They will watch whether Camilla's role is shown with renewed emphasis, or whether the palace allows...
The British royals have posed for a new formal photograph. Of course, your eye is drawn to the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate Middleton. You notice there, she's the only splash of color in this picture. But take a close look at her tiara.
The cameras were meant to capture ceremony, elegance, and royal tradition. But as Catherine, Princess of Wales, entered wearing a tiara forever tied to the late Queen's legacy, attention shifted to one brief reaction from Queen Camilla. Was it admiration, discomfort, memory, or something far more revealing? At first, the evening appeared to be exactly what the monarchy wanted the world to see. A grand royal occasion, carefully arranged, beautifully lit, and filled with the kind of symbolism only the British royal family can create. King Charles III stood at the center of the event. Queen Camilla carried her official role with familiar composure, and the palace setting seemed designed to remind everyone of continuity, dignity, and tradition. Yet almost immediately, the public conversation moved away from the diplomatic purpose of the evening and toward one image that felt impossible to ignore. Catherine, Princess of Wales, arrived wearing a historic tiara deeply connected to royal memory, one many viewers associate not only with the late Queen Elizabeth II's reign, but also with the long emotional story of royal women who have worn or protected the monarchy's most recognizable jewels. In a room filled with diamonds, gowns, medals, and ceremony, it was Catherine's entrance that appeared to change the atmosphere. And then came the camera moment. Footage from the evening appeared to show Queen Camilla reacting as Catherine entered the room. It lasted only briefly, and Buckingham Palace has not publicly attached any meaning to it. No official explanation has been given, and it would be unfair to claim we know what Camilla was thinking in that instant. But royal watchers began replaying the moment because in royal life, a glance can become a question, and a question can become a story the palace never intended to tell. Was Camilla simply acknowledging Catherine's arrival? Was she admiring the tiara, the gown, or the confidence with which the Princess of Wales returned to a major royal stage? Or did the moment feel charged because of what Catherine was wearing? A jewel carrying echoes of the late Queen, of royal duty, and of the future monarchy beginning to take shape around the Wales family? That is why the story matters. It is not just about a tiara. It is about what happens when a future queen appears, wearing history in front of the current queen. It is about the delicate balance between present authority and future expectation. It is about the way royal symbols can quietly elevate one figure while forcing everyone else in the room to be seen differently. Catherine's return to such a visible ceremonial setting carried emotional weight even before the jewels were considered. After a period of private health struggles and a carefully measured return to public duties, her appearances have been watched with unusual tenderness and attention. For many people, seeing her step back into royal life has not felt like ordinary attendance. It has felt like reassurance. It has reminded viewers that the future of the monarchy still has a calm and familiar face. That emotional response gives Catherine a rare kind of power. She does not need to speak loudly to become the center of attention. She often communicates through stillness, through careful gestures, through the steady way she enters a room already filled with history. And when that presence is paired with one of the monarchy's most meaningful tiaras, the message becomes even stronger, whether it was intended or not. The tiara itself carries a long and complicated emotional life. It is not merely a beautiful royal ornament. It belongs to a lineage of women, memories, and public associations that make it almost impossible to view as decoration alone. Royal jewels are inherited symbols. They are passed through generations, but they also collect meaning from the women who wear them. A tiara can begin as craftsmanship, become a family heirloom, and eventually turn into a public signal of status, trust, and destiny. That is what happened here. Catherine did not simply arrive wearing diamonds. She arrived wearing a story, and that story contains several layers. It recalls the late Queen's long reign and her careful stewardship of royal tradition. It evokes the memory of Diana, Princess of Wales, whose connection to certain royal jewels continues to stir deep emotion among the public. It also points forward to Catherine's own future, because every time she appears in a historic royal piece, observers see not just the Princess of Wales, but the woman who may one day stand beside William as queen. That is the tension at the heart of the moment. Queen Camilla is queen now. Catherine is the future. One represents the current reign and the long, complicated journey that brought Charles to this chapter of monarchy. The other represents continuity beyond it, a future many viewers already imagine with William, Catherine, and their children at its center. In a palace room shaped by tradition, those two meanings can exist together, but they are not the same. So when cameras appeared to capture Camilla's reaction, the public did what the public always does with royal symbolism. It began to interpret. Some saw nothing unusual at all, only a brief expression magnified by speculation. Others believe they saw a flash of recognition, as if Camilla understood immediately that Catherine's entrance had shifted the room's emotional focus. Still others suggested that the moment touched something more sensitive, the enduring power of jewels connected to women whose legacies still shape the monarchy's public imagination. The responsible truth is that no one outside that room can know for certain. A camera angle can mislead. A single expression can be misunderstood. A royal woman can look serious for 1 second and be turned into a headline by the next morning. That caution matters. But the reason people kept watching the clip was not because they needed proof of conflict. It was because the image seemed to capture a deeper royal contrast that already existed. Camilla's public role has been built through endurance and gradual acceptance. She has spent decades moving from controversy into official status, from public resistance into the ceremonial center beside the king. Her journey is one of persistence, survival, and institutional recognition. Catherine's path is different. Her image has been built through patience, restraint, family life, and an almost instinctive ability to make royal tradition feel both dignified and emotionally accessible. When those two women appear in the same royal space, the contrast is not necessarily hostile, but it is powerful. Camilla wears the authority of the present. Catherine wears the promise of what comes next. Camilla's jewels confirm her place beside Charles. Catherine's jewels often seem to prepare the public for William's future reign. And on an evening like this, the difference between confirmation and anticipation becomes impossible to ignore. That is why the tiara mattered so much. It did not only sparkle under palace lights. It placed Catherine inside the monarchy's visual inheritance. It connected her to the late Queen's world, to Diana's memory, and to the careful tradition of royal women carrying symbols larger than themselves. For viewers who follow royal history closely, the effect was immediate. Catherine appeared not merely dressed for the occasion, but woven into the continuing story of the crown. And perhaps that is what made Camilla's captured reaction so fascinating. It seemed to occur at the exact moment when the room's attention was shifting from ceremony to symbolism. Not because Catherine demanded attention, but because the symbols around her gathered it naturally. The gown, the tiara, the setting, the return, the memory of the late Queen, the future of the Wales family, all of it converged in one entrance. But was this really a simple royal appearance, or was something larger beginning to shift? That is the question royal watchers began asking almost immediately. Because if Catherine's presence now carries this much symbolic force, then every major appearance she makes becomes part of a broader story about succession, trust, and the future image of the monarchy. For King Charles, that carries both comfort and complication. Catherine's strength reassures the public and strengthens the future line. But it also reminds everyone that the next chapter is already visible. For Camilla, it creates a more delicate challenge. She must continue to occupy her present role with dignity while standing beside a future queen whose public symbolism grows stronger with every historic jewel she wears. For William, it reinforces the emotional power of the partnership that will one day define his reign. And for Catherine herself, the burden becomes heavier. The more the public sees her as the living bridge between the late Queen's legacy and the monarchy's future, the more every appearance is expected to carry meaning. A tiara becomes a message. A glance becomes a debate. A state banquet becomes a chapter in a story much larger than the event itself. That is why the first layer of the story is not about whether Camilla was upset, impressed, surprised, or simply caught in an unguarded second. The deeper issue is why people were so ready to attach meaning to that second. The answer may be that the monarchy is entering a period where the symbols around Catherine feel unusually important because they seem to tell the public that the future is not distant anymore. It is already entering the room. So as the footage circulated and viewers studied the brief exchange again and again, the central mystery only grew stronger. Was this merely a beautiful royal moment caught by cameras, or did Catherine's entrance reveal a quiet recalibration inside the monarchy, one that places her closer than ever to the late Queen's legacy and the future crown? To understand why this mattered, we have to look at what that tiara truly represents and why its appearance on Catherine's head changed the entire meaning of the evening. To understand why that tiara changed the meaning of the evening, we have to move beyond the sparkle and into the history resting inside it. Royal jewels do not simply decorate a woman at a state occasion. They place her inside a chain of memory, duty, and expectation. And when Catherine wore a piece so closely tied to the late Queen's legacy, the room was not only seeing the Princess of Wales, it was seeing the past being carried toward the future. That is why the reaction around Queen Camilla became so charged. The camera may have captured only a moment, but the tiara carried more than a century of royal meaning. A jewel like that does not arrive quietly, even when the person wearing it does. It brings with it the women who wore it before, the reigns it witnessed, the ceremonies it survived, and the public emotions attached to it over time. In royal life, history can enter a room before anyone speaks. For Catherine, that history has become increasingly important. Her public image has always relied on restraint rather than force. She does not appear to claim royal symbolism loudly. Instead, she allows it to gather around her gradually. That is what made this appearance so compelling. The tiara did not look like an accessory chosen to impress. It looked like a carefully permitted sign of trust, one that placed her closer to the emotional inheritance of Queen Elizabeth II. And that is where the story begins to deepen. The late queen was not only a monarch. For many people, especially older royal viewers who watched her reign unfold over decades, she represented steadiness in a changing world. Her jewels became part of that steadiness. They were seen at banquets, state occasions, royal portraits, and national moments where continuity mattered more than glamour. So when Catherine appears in a tiara associated with that world, the public does not simply see beauty. It sees a question of inheritance. Who is being trusted to carry the late queen's visual language forward? That question sits beneath the entire discussion. Camilla is queen now, and her place in the current reign is official. But Catherine's connection to the late queen's image carries a different emotional weight. It is not about the present alone. It is about continuity after Charles, about the future of William's reign, and about whether the public already sees Catherine as one of the safest guardians of the monarchy's memory. That possibility is delicate because it places two royal women in very different symbolic positions. Camilla's role was earned through endurance, patience, and a long road toward public acceptance. Catherine's role has grown through anticipation, family duty, and the public's sense that she belongs naturally to the monarchy's next chapter. Neither meaning cancels the other. But when both women appear in the same room, and Catherine is wearing a jewel so closely tied to the late queen's aura, comparison becomes difficult to avoid. This is why royal watchers paid attention not only to the tiara, but to the atmosphere around it. The palace may never say that the choice was meant to signal anything beyond tradition. It may simply have been a beautiful historic piece chosen for a formal evening. That interpretation is entirely possible. But royal symbolism rarely remains simple once the public begins reading it. A jewel can be selected for one reason and understood for another. A moment can be planned as ceremony and received as prophecy. The emotional power of the tiara comes from the way it connects women across generations. A royal jewel can pass from one wearer to another, but it does not arrive empty. It carries memory. It carries comparison. It carries public affection and public pain. That is especially true when the jewel is linked, directly or indirectly, to royal women whose lives became part of the nation's emotional history. The late queen represents duty. Diana represents longing, loss, and complicated love. Catherine represents recovery, steadiness, and the future waiting just ahead. So when Catherine entered wearing that piece, the image did something the palace could not fully control. It joined those meanings together. It placed her inside a story that began long before she married William and will continue long after Charles's reign is finished. And that is why the moment felt larger than a state occasion. It suggested that Catherine is no longer merely being dressed in royal history. She is becoming one of the figures through whom that history is being reinterpreted. But was this simply honor, or was it preparation? That question gives the story its tension. Catherine has already been carefully associated with some of the monarchy's most meaningful visual symbols. Each appearance seems to add another layer to her public identity. One jewel suggests trust. Another suggests continuity. A state banquet suggests diplomatic confidence. A calm return after personal hardship suggests emotional resilience. Taken together, these moments begin to form a pattern the public can feel even when the palace does not explain it. For Camilla, that pattern can be complicated. She has her own jewels, her own ceremonial authority, and her own place beside the king. But Catherine's symbolism often feels oriented toward the future, and future symbolism can sometimes outshine present rank in the public imagination. That does not mean Catherine is trying to overshadow anyone. It means the monarchy's visual language has begun to arrange itself around what comes next. And when the future enters a room wearing the late queen's memory, people notice. This is the subtle power of Catherine's position. She does not need to challenge Camilla. She does not need to speak. She does not need to behave differently. The symbolism does much of the work around her. That can make her presence feel almost effortless, but it is not without pressure. Every time she wears a historic piece, viewers ask what it means. Every time she appears beside William, they imagine the next reign. Every time she is connected to the late queen, her future role becomes more emotionally defined. And this is where the monarchy's private calculations may become more serious. The institution needs Catherine to be visible enough to reassure the public, but not so visible that Charles's reign feels overshadowed. It needs Camilla to remain secure without making the future look delayed. It needs William and Catherine to appear prepared without appearing impatient. That is an exceptionally narrow path, and one jewel can make the balance feel even more fragile. Some observers may believe the public is reading too much into a single appearance. That caution is fair. No tiara, no camera angle, and no brief expression can prove a hidden palace conflict. But the intensity of the reaction still reveals something important. It reveals that Catherine has become a figure whose symbolism now carries institutional weight. When she wears a historic tiara, people do not treat it as fashion. They treat it as a sign. That sign affects more than Catherine. It affects how people read Camilla's role, how they imagine William's future, how they remember the late Queen, and how they interpret the monarchy's direction. The tiara becomes a meeting point for several royal stories at once. It holds the dignity of the past, the complexity of the present, and the anticipation of the future. Few objects in royal life can do that so instantly. And perhaps that is why Camilla's captured reaction became so fascinating. It appeared to take place at the exact intersection of those meanings. The Queen was not simply watching Catherine arrive. She was, at least in the eyes of the public, witnessing a future queen enter wearing the emotional language of the monarchy's most admired modern sovereign. Whether Camilla felt pride, reflection, discomfort, or nothing unusual at all remains unknown. But the image allowed viewers to imagine all of it. That is the power and danger of cameras in royal life. They freeze what may have been an ordinary second and invite the world to build a narrative around it. The palace can manage entrances, gowns, guest lists, and official photographs. It cannot fully manage what people believe they see in a face when history walks into the room wearing diamonds. The deeper issue, then, is not whether Camilla was caught in a private feeling. The deeper issue is why that possibility seemed so believable to viewers. It is because the monarchy is already living through a transition of symbols. Charles reigns, Camilla stands beside him, but the emotional future increasingly gathers around the Wales family. Catherine's tiara appearance made that future feel visible, elegant, and quietly unavoidable. And once that possibility entered the conversation, the evening became more than a royal return or a beautiful fashion moment. It became a question of succession expressed without a word. Who carries the late Queen's legacy now? Who can wear history without being swallowed by it? And who is quietly being prepared to make the next monarchy feel familiar before it officially begins? Those questions do not have simple answers, and the palace may prefer that they remain unspoken. But the public has already begun asking them through every photograph, every clip, and every careful reading of Catherine's role. The tiara did not create the transition. It illuminated it. It made visible what many royal watchers had already sensed, that Catherine's position inside the monarchy is becoming more deeply connected to memory, trust, and future authority. And that is why the story cannot stop with the jewel itself. To understand why this moment carried such force, we have to look at what was happening around Catherine as she entered the room, how the focus shifted, and why one brief camera reaction began to feel like a signal from a palace balancing history, loyalty, and the future of the crown. What was happening around Catherine as she entered the room was not a loud shift, and that is precisely why it mattered. In royal settings, the most revealing changes are often the ones that unfold without interruption. No one needs to stop the music. No announcement needs to be made. The room simply adjusts, the cameras follow, and suddenly everyone understands that attention has moved. As Catherine stepped into view, the atmosphere appeared to gather itself around her. It was not because she demanded attention, and it was not because the evening had been designed publicly as her moment. The official purpose remained ceremony, diplomacy, and the projection of royal unity. But symbolism has a way of changing the emotional direction of a room before anyone inside it has time to correct the impression. And on this occasion, the tiara did not merely complete Catherine's appearance. It altered how the entire scene was read. That is why the focus shifted so quickly. The cameras were trained on the grandeur of the evening, but the public eye began searching for meaning in the spaces between the formal images. Where was Catherine positioned? Who turned toward her? How did William remain near her? How did Camilla respond? And why did one brief expression become powerful enough to eclipse so much of the carefully arranged pageantry around it? The answer lies in the way Catherine now functions within the royal story. She is no longer simply a senior royal attending an important event. She has become a symbol through which the public reads reassurance. Her presence suggests continuity. Her calmness suggests control. Her return after private difficulty suggests resilience. When she appears wearing a tiara tied to royal memory, the effect becomes layered because the public is not only watching what she wears, they are watching what the monarchy appears to trust her to carry. That is the hidden connection many royal observers began to make. The tiara was not only a jewel of the past, it became, in that room, a visual argument about the future. Catherine wore it with a kind of restraint that allowed the history to remain visible without turning the moment into performance. That restraint has become one of her most valuable qualities. She can stand beneath the weight of royal symbolism without making it feel forced, and that gives her presence a particular authority. But that authority can create pressure for others. Queen Camilla's role is formal, current, and established. She occupies the place beside the king in this reign. Yet Catherine's growing symbolism does not depend on present rank alone. It depends on public anticipation. And anticipation can be powerful because it asks the audience to look forward. It invites viewers to imagine the next chapter before it has officially begun. In a monarchy built on succession, that kind of forward-looking attention can change the emotional balance of a room. Was this really about one reaction caught on camera, or was it about the way the room seemed to recognize Catherine's future before anyone said so? That is the question that gives the moment its deeper force. Camilla did not need to show visible discomfort for the scene to become meaningful. The public already understood the contrast. The Queen represented Charles's present reign. Catherine represented the reign that will one day follow. And the tiara made that contrast impossible to ignore. This is where the palace's internal dynamics become more complicated. Royal households are experts at managing visibility, but they cannot fully control emotional gravity. They can arrange seating, lighting, processions, and official photographs. They can decide which jewels are worn and which moments are released to the public. But they cannot decide how deeply a symbol will affect the audience once it appears. A tiara linked to royal memory, placed on the head of the future queen, will naturally produce interpretations the palace may never confirm. And those interpretations do not affect Catherine alone. They affect William as well. When she is seen wearing a historically loaded royal piece, the public does not separate her image from his future. The Prince of Wales becomes part of the same visual message, even when he is standing quietly beside her. His role as future king gives Catherine's symbolism structure. Her public warmth gives his future reign emotional depth. Together, they create an image the monarchy needs, especially at a time when stability feels more valuable than spectacle. That may be why William's presence near Catherine matters so much in these settings. He does not need to dominate the frame to influence it. His proximity often gives the impression of protection, partnership, and quiet authority. In moments where Catherine is carrying intense public attention, William's position becomes part of the architecture around her. It tells viewers that she is not standing alone beneath the weight of royal expectation. She is part of a future that is already being carefully shaped. But for Camilla, the same image can be more difficult to navigate. The Queen has earned her place through time, endurance, and official recognition, yet public memory around royal women has never been simple. Catherine's appearance in a tiara associated with the emotional legacy of earlier royal figures naturally stirs comparisons that may be unfair, but are difficult to prevent. The public does not always judge by title. It judges by feeling, association, and memory. That is why the captured reaction became such a point of fascination. Viewers were not only watching Camilla's face, they were watching decades of royal history reflected in a single second. Some saw recognition. Some saw reserve. Some saw nothing more than a natural expression interpreted too heavily by people looking for drama. But even the disagreement proved how powerful the image had become. If the moment had meant nothing to the public, no one would have replayed it. The palace may prefer to treat the evening as a successful ceremonial event, and officially that may be the fairest view. But royal history is rarely shaped only by official purposes. It is shaped by images that survive after the speeches have ended. A woman entering a ballroom wearing a historic tiara can become part of the monarchy's long visual record. A glance from another royal woman can become a debate about power. A quiet shift in attention can become evidence in the public imagination that something larger is moving behind the scenes. This is why Catherine's role now carries such strategic importance. She is not merely restoring her own public schedule after a difficult personal period. She is restoring one of the monarchy's most reassuring images, the future queen appearing composed, dignified, and connected to royal tradition. In an institution where continuity is everything, that matters enormously. Her presence gives the public a sense that the next chapter is not uncertain or unfinished, but already forming with care. Yet that very reassurance creates a contradiction. The more strongly Catherine reassures the public, the more central she becomes. The more central she becomes, the more every gesture around her is examined. A tiara that once might have been discussed as a jewel now becomes a statement about succession. A dress becomes a sign of confidence. A return to duty becomes a symbol of institutional recovery. Even silence becomes part of the message. Was this about personal loyalty, or was the institution quietly protecting itself? Perhaps both possibilities sit inside the same image. Catherine may have worn the tiara as an act of tradition, a respectful continuation of royal custom. But the palace may also understand that her association with such symbols strengthens the monarchy's future image at a time when the present remains under constant examination. That does not require a secret plan. It requires only an institution aware of what the public wants to see: steadiness, dignity, and a future that feels secure. The emotional tension comes from the fact that Camilla and Catherine represent different kinds of security. Camilla offers personal continuity for Charles, the companion who stands beside him in the reign he waited so long to begin. Catherine offers generational continuity, the promise that the monarchy will move beyond the current chapter into something the public already recognizes and, in many cases, trusts. Both forms of security matter, but they do not carry equal emotional force in the public imagination. And that difference may explain why the room seemed to change when Catherine entered. The ceremony remained the same, but the emotional focus shifted toward the future. The tiara acted almost like a crown before the crown, not in formal authority, but in public feeling. It allowed viewers to imagine Catherine not only as Princess of Wales, but as a future queen standing inside the late queen's visual legacy. That is a powerful position, but it is also a vulnerable one. Because once the public begins to see Catherine as the keeper of royal memory, they may expect her to embody the monarchy's calm even when the institution itself is unsettled. They may expect her to carry Diana's emotional echo, the late queen's discipline, and the future crown's promise all at once. No tiara can make that burden lighter. It can only make it more visible. This may be the hidden cost of royal symbolism. It elevates, but it also exposes. It honors, but it also asks. Catherine's appearance may have looked effortless, but the meaning placed upon it was anything but light. The more the public reads her as the bridge between past and future, the more every royal woman around her is placed into relation with that bridge. Camilla becomes the present beside it, and becomes duty beside it. William becomes succession beside it, and Catherine becomes the figure through whom those meanings meet. That is why the moment cannot be treated as simple fashion commentary. It was a visual convergence of history, family memory, succession, and public expectation. The cameras captured a reaction, but they also captured something more lasting: the monarchy's difficulty in holding past, present, and future inside one frame without allowing comparison to emerge. And once that comparison entered the conversation, the situation moved into far more sensitive territory. Because the real question was no longer whether Catherine looked magnificent in the late queen's sacred tiara, or whether Camilla's brief camera moment meant anything at all. The real question was whether the palace had just shown the public, perhaps unintentionally, that the future queen's symbolic power is now strong enough to reshape the entire room around her. If Catherine's symbolic power is now strong enough to reshape the room around her, then the palace is no longer managing only appearances. It is managing consequence. Because once a royal image travels beyond the ballroom, beyond the official photographs, and into the public imagination, it can no longer be controlled by protocol officers, carefully chosen angles, or the polite language of palace tradition. That is where the story begins to accelerate. The moment involving Camilla's reported reaction may have lasted only seconds, and it remains unconfirmed what, if anything, that expression truly meant. But the reaction to the reaction became the real development. Viewers did not simply notice Catherine's tiara. They noticed how the room seemed to respond to it. They noticed how quickly attention gathered around the Princess of Wales. They noticed how easily the evening's official purpose was overtaken by a question the palace never publicly asked: who now carries the monarchy's most powerful emotional inheritance? For Buckingham Palace, that kind of public shift is delicate. A state occasion is supposed to project unity, not comparison. It is designed to show the royal family as ordered, confident, and aligned around the crown. Yet when one image creates a debate about Camilla's place, Catherine's future, Diana's memory, and the late Queen's legacy all at once, the ceremony begins to carry meanings far beyond the event itself. What was meant to look seamless suddenly becomes layered, and layers can become dangerous when the public starts reading them faster than the palace can explain them. The most serious consequence is not that people talked about a tiara. Royal jewels always create interest. The deeper consequence is that Catherine's appearance appeared to confirm something many royal watchers have already sensed: that her public meaning has moved into a new stage. She is no longer being viewed only as a graceful participant in royal ceremony. She is increasingly read as one of the monarchy's central symbols of continuity. That makes every historic jewel she wears feel like a statement, even when the palace offers no statement at all. This is the turning point. Catherine's symbolism is no longer passive. It is active. It shapes how the public reads Camilla. It strengthens how people imagine William's future reign. It influences how Charles's current reign is understood. It even affects how the late Queen's memory is carried into a new generation. That is an extraordinary amount of meaning to rest on one woman's entrance into a room, and yet that is exactly how monarchy works. Its power is often concentrated in symbols long before it becomes visible in words. For Camilla, the pressure becomes especially sensitive. The Queen's role beside Charles is secure in formal terms, but public emotion is rarely governed by formality alone. Her position is recognized, but Catherine's future is anticipated. Camilla's jewels may represent authority in the present, but Catherine's jewels often seem to point toward inheritance. When those two meanings appear side by side, the comparison does not need to be spoken aloud. The audience feels it. That does not mean Camilla was diminished intentionally. It does not mean the palace arranged the evening to create discomfort, and it certainly does not prove any private tension. But royal optics can create consequences even when no one intends them. A queen can be perfectly composed and still appear caught in the shadow of a more emotionally charged symbol. A future queen can behave with complete restraint and still become the center of the public's imagination. A single expression can be innocent and still become a mirror for decades of royal history. This is why the camera moment mattered. It gave viewers a visual point around which to gather their interpretations. Without it, the story may have remained about Catherine's elegant return and the historic weight of a tiara. With it, the evening became a scene of contrast. The present queen watching the future queen. The current reign standing beside the next era. The memory of the late queen, and the lingering echo of Diana meeting the complicated history of Camilla's journey in one glittering room. And if the palace was watching the reaction closely, what did they see that the public may have missed? They may have seen not scandal, but risk. The risk that Catherine's rise in symbolic authority could make Camilla's role feel more fragile in public conversation. The risk that every future tiara appearance could become a referendum on succession. The risk that the monarchy's effort to show continuity could accidentally expose competition between different forms of royal meaning. That risk will shape future decisions. Palace advisors may now be even more careful about which jewels Catherine wears, how Camilla is positioned, where William stands, and how official images are released. They may understand that a tiara is no longer just a ceremonial choice when it appears on the head of the Princess of Wales. It becomes a sign that viewers will interpret through history, memory, illness, recovery, marriage, succession, and the emotional legacy of women who came before her. The pressure also falls on Charles. As monarch, he must hold the present reign together while allowing the future to become visible enough to reassure the nation. That is not an easy balance. If Catherine appears too central, some may say the next reign is already overtaking his own. If Camilla appears too heavily emphasized, others may say the future is being held back. If William and Catherine are shown too carefully, people look for hidden meaning. If they are shown too casually, people wonder whether the palace is losing control of its own symbolism. This is the modern burden of monarchy. Even harmony must be staged carefully. For William, the consequences are equally serious. Catherine's symbolic strength strengthens him because his future monarchy depends not only on constitutional succession, but on public confidence in the partnership beside him. Yet it also places his wife under greater scrutiny. The more she is seen as the living bridge between the late queen's steadiness and the next reign, the more the public may expect her to embody calm at moments when calm has a personal cost. William knows better than most how unforgiving royal attention can become when affection turns into expectation. That is why his quiet presence near Catherine matters. When cameras focus on her, William's role is not only that of husband or heir. He becomes part of the protective frame around her future image. He helps turn her symbolism into partnership rather than isolation. Without that balance, Catherine's public meaning could become too heavy, placing her alone beneath the weight of history, memory, and anticipation. But the public may not always see that structure. Viewers often see the jewel first. They see the gown, the tiara, the entrance, the face captured in a fraction of a second. They feel the emotional impact before they understand the institutional calculation. That is why the story moves so quickly from elegance into consequence. The moment looked beautiful, but beauty in royal life is rarely harmless. It attracts attention, and attention attracts interpretation. Some royal commentators may argue that the entire reaction has been exaggerated. They may say that one camera angle cannot reveal palace feeling, that one tiara does not announce a new era, and that one royal woman's brief expression should not be turned into a private drama. That caution is necessary. But even if every dramatic interpretation is reduced, the public response remains meaningful. People reacted strongly because the image touched something already alive in the monarchy story, the sense that Catherine is becoming central to how the future is imagined. That is where the incident moves beyond gossip. It becomes a study in royal transition. The monarchy is not simply waiting for the next reign. It is slowly teaching the public to recognize it. Every state banquet, every historic jewel, every carefully released photograph becomes part of that education. Catherine's tiara appearance did not create that process, but it accelerated public awareness of it. And that awareness changes the stakes for everyone. Camilla must continue to project confidence without appearing defensive. Catherine must carry symbolism without seeming to seek it. William must support the future without making the present look temporary. Charles must honor the past, stabilize the present, and prepare the future without allowing those three duties to collide visibly. This is why the captured moment became so powerful. It seemed to show the collision just briefly enough for people to sense it, but not clearly enough for anyone to prove it. That uncertainty keeps the story alive. Was Camilla's expression simply a passing glance? Was Catherine's tiara merely a traditional choice? Was the room's attention shifting naturally, or was the monarchy revealing a deeper recalibration through ceremony? The questions remain open because royal life is often most revealing when it refuses to explain itself. By the end of the evening, the official event may have continued exactly as planned. The guests may have seen dignity, the photographs may have shown elegance, and the palace may have considered the occasion a success. But the public had taken away something more complicated. They had seen Catherine wearing a jewel that seemed to carry the late queen's memory into the future, and they had seen Camilla, even for a second, placed within that same emotional frame. That is the strongest escalation in the story. Not a confirmed conflict, not a palace confrontation, and not a proven private reaction, but a public realization that Catherine's symbolic authority has reached a point where even silence around her creates meaning. She does not need to speak for the room to shift. She does not need to claim the future for people to see it gathering around her. She only has to enter wearing history, and suddenly the entire monarchy appears to rearrange itself around what comes next. Because the real consequence was not only what happened in that moment, it was what that moment appeared to reveal about the future. That Catherine's connection to royal memory is becoming one of the monarchy's strongest instruments of continuity, and that every figure around her must now be positioned with extraordinary care. But even then, one question remained unanswered, and it was the question that could define the entire story. That unanswered question is whether Catherine's growing symbolic authority is simply the natural result of her future position, or whether the monarchy is now relying on her more deliberately than it is willing to say. Because once a royal figure becomes powerful through memory, trust, and public emotion, The palace can no longer treat her appearances as ordinary. Every jewel becomes part of a larger conversation. Every entrance becomes a signal. Every reaction around her becomes a clue people will try to understand. That is why this moment matters beyond the camera clip. The brief focus on Camilla may have sparked the debate, but the deeper story belongs to the transformation happening around Catherine. She is not only being watched as the Princess of Wales, she is being watched as the woman many believe will carry the emotional tone of the next reign. That means her connection to the late Queen's jewels is not merely beautiful. It is strategic, historical, and deeply personal to the public. For decades, the late Queen represented stability in a way no palace team could manufacture. Her presence made the monarchy feel continuous even when the world changed around it. After her passing, that sense of continuity had to move somewhere. It could not remain only in memory. It had to be carried forward by living figures who could make the crown feel familiar again. In many ways, Catherine has become one of the clearest answers to that need. That does not mean she replaces the late Queen, and it does not mean she is being presented as a finished monarch before her time. The more careful reading is that Catherine has become a bridge. She connects the dignity of the old reign to the expectations of the future one. She can wear a historic tiara without making it feel trapped in the past. She can stand beside William without making the next reign appear rushed. She can carry public affection without appearing to chase it. Those qualities make her unusually valuable at a moment when the monarchy needs steadiness more than spectacle. And that is what makes Camilla's position so delicate. The Queen remains part of the current royal order. Her role beside Charles is official, visible, and significant. But public symbolism often moves differently from official rank. Camilla may hold the place of Queen now, yet Catherine carries the image of the Queen to come. That difference does not need conflict to become powerful. It only needs a camera, a historic jewel, and an audience already sensitive to the emotional language of succession. There are two ways to understand the captured moment. The first is simple and fair. Camilla may have been caught in an ordinary second, her expression misread by viewers searching for drama in a highly formal setting. A royal banquet is filled with movement, lighting, introductions, and constant attention. A glance can easily be misunderstood. Under that interpretation, the story is less about tension and more about how quickly the public can attach meaning to a moment that may have meant very little inside the room. But the second interpretation is why the image has lasted. Some royal watchers believe the reaction mattered because it seemed to reveal the pressure created when future symbolism becomes stronger than present ceremony. Catherine entered wearing a tiara linked to royal memory, and the room's attention appeared to move with her. Whether Camilla felt anything unusual or not, the public felt the shift. And once the public feels a shift, the monarchy must live with the meaning that follows. This is the long-term consequence. Catherine's future appearances will now be read with even greater attention. Which tiara she wears, where she stands, how William supports her, how Camilla is positioned nearby, and how Charles allows the image of the Wales family to develop will all be examined as part of the monarchy's continuing story. The palace may intend elegance. Viewers may see transition. The palace may intend tradition. Viewers may see preparation. That is the challenge of royal symbolism. It cannot be turned on and off. Once a figure becomes associated with continuity, every historic object placed near her adds to that impression. Catherine's tiara moments are no longer just fashion commentary. They are part of how the public learns to imagine her as future queen. They train the eye to see her inside the lineage of royal women before her, while also making her seem ready for the responsibilities ahead. For William, this strengthens the emotional foundation of his future reign. A future king does not inherit public confidence through law alone. He inherits the throne, but he must build trust. Catherine helps build that trust because she gives the future monarchy warmth, familiarity, and grace under pressure. Her presence softens the scale of the institution without weakening its dignity. She makes the crown feel human while still respecting its mystery. But that strength also comes with a cost. The more Catherine becomes the public's symbol of stability, the more difficult it becomes for her to simply be present without being interpreted. A quiet expression becomes resilience. A jewel becomes destiny. A formal appearance becomes evidence of recovery, preparation, and future queenship all at once. That may flatter the institution, but it also places enormous pressure on the woman at the center of the image. The monarchy must therefore be careful. It can benefit from Catherine's public trust, but it must not consume it. It can allow her to carry historic symbols, but it must remember that symbols can become heavy. Royal history has shown that women near the crown are often praised for strength until that strength becomes expected in every circumstance. The lesson of the past is not only that symbols matter, it is that people placed beneath them must be protected. That may be one of the quiet reasons the late Queen's legacy feels so present in this story. She understood the power of restraint, but also the loneliness of duty. She knew that monarchy survives through consistency, yet consistency often requires private sacrifice. When Catherine wears jewels associated with that world, she is not simply inheriting glamour. She is stepping closer to the same discipline, the same silence, and the same lifelong expectation of composure. And this is where the final meaning of the moment begins to come into focus. The public did not react so strongly because Catherine looked beautiful. They reacted because she looked meaningful. She appeared to hold several royal stories at once: the late Queen's steadiness, Diana's emotional memory, William's future, Camilla's present, and her own journey back into public life after personal difficulty. That convergence made the camera moment feel larger than any one expression. The palace may never explain what Camilla was thinking. It may never confirm whether the tiara was chosen with deeper symbolism in mind. It may simply allow the evening to remain what official royal occasions often become, a polished image with unspoken meaning beneath it. But the audience has already drawn its own lesson. Catherine is becoming one of the monarchy's most powerful carriers of continuity, and every time she appears wearing history, that role becomes harder to ignore. So the real story is not whether Camilla was uncomfortable, impressed, reflective, or simply caught at the wrong angle. The real story is that the future of the monarchy now seems to arrive through Catherine with unusual force. She does not need a speech to remind people of what is coming. She does not need a formal announcement to make the next chapter feel visible. She only has to enter a royal room wearing the memory of the crown, and the public begins to understand where its attention is moving. That is why royal observers will keep watching. They will watch which jewels Catherine wears next. They will watch how Camilla is framed in future ceremonies. They will watch whether Charles continues to allow the Wales family's symbolism to grow stronger while his own reign is still unfolding. And they will watch William, because Catherine's rise in royal meaning is inseparable from the reign they are being prepared to share. So what do you think? Was this simply one camera moment during a beautiful royal evening, or does it point to a much larger shift inside the monarchy, where Catherine is becoming the living bridge between the late Queen's legacy and the future crown? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep royal analysis, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next documentary-style royal story. Because in the royal family, the future is not always announced with a crown. Sometimes, it enters quietly beneath a tiara, while everyone else in the room realizes that history has already begun to move.
Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh, a title held, of course, by his late father, Prince Philip, for more than 70 years. It had been the late Prince's wish for Prince Edward to be granted the dukedom after his death.
For years, Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh, was the royal no one expected to make a decisive move. But now, as whispers grow around Queen Camilla, a symbolic brooch, and Prince William's future coronation, one quiet question has unsettled palace watchers. Did Edward just step between the present queen and the next reign? At first glance, the story appears almost too subtle to matter. There was no confrontation, no palace announcement, and no confirmation from Buckingham Palace that anyone had been blocked from anything. Yet royal power rarely announces itself in plain language. It moves through seating plans, invitations, jewelry, timing, absence, and the placement of trusted figures near the future crown. In that silent royal language, Edward's name has suddenly become much harder to ignore. For decades, he was treated as one of the monarchy's safest background figures. He did not chase headlines or compete with louder members of the family. Alongside Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, he built a public image that was deliberately understated. And in a royal family often shaped by noise, scandal, and difficult headlines, that quietness may now be the very reason he matters. According to royal commentators, the Duke of Edinburgh is increasingly viewed as a figure of steadiness inside a family where steadiness has become one of the most valuable currencies. His title, once held by Prince Philip, the late Duke of Edinburgh, links him to an older royal code: service without performance, loyalty without spectacle, and authority that does not need to be shouted in order to be felt. So when speculation began suggesting that Edward may be playing a quiet role in shaping who stands closest to Prince William, the Prince of Wales, during a future coronation, the idea did not feel entirely accidental. It touched a deeper question already forming around the monarchy. When King Charles III's reign eventually gives way to William's, who will remain at the center of royal influence? And what role will Camilla be allowed to occupy once the future crown belongs to William and Catherine, Princess of Wales? That is where the brooch enters the story. In royal life, a brooch is never just decoration. It is one of the monarchy's most controlled visual messages, worn close to the heart and selected with precision. A tiara may announce rank. A necklace may complete ceremony. But a brooch can suggest loyalty, memory, alignment, or quiet defiance. It can tell the room which legacy a royal woman wishes to claim, and what authority she wants the cameras to notice. Some observers have pointed to Camilla's use of symbolic jewelry as part of a larger effort to reinforce her place beside Charles. That interpretation remains analysis, not confirmed palace strategy. But it is easy to understand why people watch these details carefully. Camilla's path to her current role has never been simple. Her place is official, but public feeling around her has always been more complicated than protocol can fully solve. A crown-shaped brooch, or a jewel associated with Charles's reign, can look like a statement of belonging. But this is exactly why the reported role of Edward becomes so intriguing. If Camilla uses visible symbols to secure her place in the present, Edward appears to use something far quieter, restraint. He does not seem to answer jewelry with jewelry or statement with statement. Instead, his influence, if royal watchers are reading the pattern correctly, comes through timing, consistency, and proximity to the future Wales reign. He is not performing power. He is standing near it. Was this really about one brooch, or was it about the silent architecture of the next monarchy beginning to take shape? Because a future coronation is not only a ceremony, it is a map. It tells the public who belongs in the closest circle, who represents continuity, who is trusted with visibility, and who is placed respectfully but unmistakably outside the central frame. No official plans for William's coronation have been arranged, and any claim that Edward has formally blocked Camilla from such an event remains unconfirmed. But the power of this story lies in what the speculation reveals. It asks whether Camilla's role after Charles will remain prominent, or whether the Wales era will quietly redraw the boundaries around her. For William, the question is personal and institutional at once. His future reign will need stability, but it will also need emotional clarity. The public will look to him, to Catherine, and to their children as the central image of a new chapter. Around them will stand the relatives who appear most useful, most trusted, and least likely to distract from the crown itself. In that environment, Edward's quiet reliability may become more valuable than many people once imagined. Camilla, by contrast, represents a different and more complicated chapter. Her position beside Charles is tied to his personal life, his long road to the throne, and the story of acceptance that followed. But William's coronation would belong to a different era, one shaped by William's instincts, Catherine's public trust, and the need to present the monarchy as moving forward. That distinction is where the tension becomes sharp. If Edward is being seen, rightly or wrongly, as someone who could limit Camilla's centrality in that future scene, then the story is not simply about one quiet move. It is about the monarchy preparing to decide which parts of the current reign continue into the next, and which parts must gently recede. That is a far more delicate issue than any single brooch could suggest. The first layer of conflict, then, is not loud hostility. It is positioning. Camilla's symbols say she belongs to the present crown. Edward's rising visibility suggests he may belong to the structure protecting the future crown. William's eventual accession will require a new arrangement of loyalties, and Catherine's place beside him will make that arrangement even more visible. This is why the palace would be careful. To push Camilla too far outward would look ungracious. To keep her too close to William's central image could create distraction and revive comparisons the monarchy may wish to leave behind. The answer, if there is one, would have to be managed through quiet choreography rather than public explanation. So the brooch shock, the Camilla speculation, and Edward's reported positioning all point toward the same hidden issue. The monarchy is already thinking about the next reign, even if it never says so openly. And if the future is being arranged through symbols, absences, and carefully chosen loyalties, then the most important moves may be happening in plain sight. But that still does not explain why Edward, of all people, appears to have become so central to the conversation. To understand why his silence now carries weight, we have to look at what was quietly building long before the public noticed. To understand why Edward's silence now carries weight, we have to look at what his silence has always meant. In a family where some members became known for drama, distance, or controversy, the Duke of Edinburgh became known for something less glamorous, but far more useful to the crown: dependability. For most of his adult life, Edward did not appear to be competing for influence. He was not treated as the royal who would shape the center of power, nor was he often discussed as a decisive figure in the monarchy's future. But that may be exactly why his position has become so interesting now. In royal life, those who do not seek the spotlight can sometimes move through the palace with a freedom denied to those constantly watched by it. That reputation has grown more important as the royal family has entered a fragile period. Charles's reign carries the weight of transition. William's future role is more visible. Catherine's public importance has deepened. Camilla's standing, while official, continues to carry complex public feeling. And in the middle of those pressures, Edward and Sophie have presented something the monarchy badly needs: a stable pair of working royals who rarely create problems. This is the first reason Edward matters. He is not powerful because he dominates the room. He is powerful because he does not disturb it. Palace systems rely on figures who can appear, represent, and support without pulling attention away from the crown. That kind of service may look ordinary from the outside, but inside an institution built on controlled appearances, it becomes quiet authority. His usefulness has increased because the monarchy has fewer dependable figures than it once did. Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, is no longer a public asset. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, and Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, remain outside the working royal structure. And the Wales family, while central to the future, cannot carry every ceremonial burden alone. So Edward's position has changed without being announced. He may not be near the throne in succession, but influence is not always measured that way. Sometimes it is measured by loyalty, discretion, and the ability to stand near important moments without making them about oneself. By that standard, the Duke of Edinburgh becomes more significant than his old public image suggested. The title he carries adds another layer. The Dukedom of Edinburgh was held for decades by Prince Philip, the late Duke of Edinburgh, a figure remembered for service beside Queen Elizabeth II. When Charles granted that title to Edward, it linked his youngest brother to a legacy of support rather than central command. But was this really about family loyalty, or was the institution quietly protecting itself? If the palace is thinking about the next reign, it must decide which figures can be placed closest to William and Catherine without reopening old wounds or confusing the public message. A coronation is not only a national ritual, it is the first picture of a new reign. Every face matters. The closest relatives signal trust. The placement of former central figures signals continuity or distance. The abbey, the procession, the guest list, and the front rows all become a map of internal priorities. If royal observers are correct that Edward is becoming part of the future-facing structure, then his quiet alignment carries serious consequences. For Camilla, the question is delicate because her role changes the moment William becomes king. She may remain a senior royal figure, but she would no longer be queen beside the reigning monarch. Catherine would become queen consort, and the central image would shift toward the Wales family. That transition will need careful handling because the emotions around Camilla have always been complicated. No official source has confirmed that Edward has blocked Camilla from any future coronation role. That claim remains speculative, yet the idea has gained attention because it fits into a wider conversation about whether the next reign may be more selective about who stands in its most intimate frame. William's monarchy will need to look stable, disciplined, and clear, not overshadowed by unresolved debates from the past. This is why Edward's restraint could become strategic. His influence, if it exists, would be more effective through support for a different center. William, Catherine, and trusted family members who can reinforce their future without controversy. In palace politics, one does not always block by confrontation. Sometimes one blocks by becoming the safer alternative. Sophie's reputation for loyal service adds another layer. Together, Edward and Sophie offer the monarchy a model of support that feels practical rather than theatrical, steady rather than self-promoting. If Camilla's jewelry choices are read by some as statements of belonging to Charles's reign, then Edward's message is almost the opposite. His message is not worn. It is enacted. He appears in the right places, supports the right duties, and avoids unnecessary tension. One form of symbolism shines from the chest. The other is built through years of presence. The contrast matters because William's future coronation would likely reward the second kind of power more than the first. A new reign needs less self-declaration and more disciplined support. It needs relatives who can stand close without making themselves the focus, and figures whose presence reassures rather than reopens old arguments. If that is the direction of travel, the stakes become larger than one woman's placement. Who will be photographed as trusted kin? Who will be invited into the first symbols of William's reign? Who will be politely honored, but kept just far enough from the center that the new image remains undisturbed? The monarchy may still speak publicly in terms of unity, but behind that unity is a constant process of selection. Some figures become central because they carry public trust. Others are moved carefully to the margins because their presence creates too much noise. And some, like Edward, become more important because they have spent years proving they can be close to power without trying to possess it. That is why the story now moves beyond the brooch itself. The brooch may have stunned observers because it made Camilla's symbolism visible, but Edward's influence appears to work beneath visibility. It raises the possibility that the future of the monarchy is being guarded not by speeches or confrontation, but by quiet decisions about who is allowed to stand nearest when history turns. And once that possibility enters the conversation, the story moves into far more sensitive territory. Because the deeper question is not simply whether Edward has influence. It is whether his influence is now being used to help shape the circle around William's crown, and whether Camilla's place in that circle is already being quietly reconsidered. If Camilla's place in William's future circle is already being quietly reconsidered, then the issue is no longer only ceremonial. It becomes a question of how the next reign protects itself before it begins. Coronations are prepared through years of loyalty, visibility, and carefully tested relationships, long before the abbey doors ever open. That is why Edward's quiet rise feels so revealing. His strength is not the kind that announces itself. It becomes useful when the institution needs someone steady enough to absorb pressure without becoming the story. In a family where several figures have become defined by public controversy, the Duke of Edinburgh offers something different: continuity without turbulence. But there is another layer beneath that usefulness. Edward's loyalty does not appear tied only to the current reign. It also seems connected to the monarchy as a continuing structure, one that must survive Charles, settle around William, and present Catherine as queen consort without dragging old conflicts into a new age. If royal observers are reading the pattern correctly, that may explain why his alignment now matters beyond his place in the line of succession. This is where palace politics becomes more subtle. Formal rank decides who inherits. Informal trust decides who is close enough to influence the atmosphere around inheritance. A person may never sit on the throne and still help shape the picture around it. They may not command the future, but they can protect the frame in which the future is introduced. That lesson gives Edward and Sophie new relevance. They are not the emotional center of the monarchy, but they can help stabilize those who are. They do not need to lead the Wales era, but they may help secure the boundaries around it. And if there is concern about how much space Camilla should occupy once William becomes king, then a trusted figure like Edward becomes useful not as an opponent, but as a guardian of tone. Was this about personal loyalty, or was the institution quietly protecting itself? The answer may lie in the difference between affection and architecture. Charles's bond with Camilla belongs to the story of his reign. William's coronation, whenever it comes, will belong to a different royal structure. It will need to tell the country that a new center has formed, and that the family around it supports that transition without pulling attention backward. That is why even the idea of Camilla's placement becomes sensitive. She cannot simply be erased from royal history, nor should she be treated as irrelevant to the reign she helped accompany. But the next reign cannot be built around Charles's emotional story. It must be built around William's constitutional future, Catherine's public trust, and the children who represent the line continuing beyond them. The brooch discussion matters because it shows how symbols can become claims. If Camilla wears jewels that underline her connection to Charles's authority, she is visually reminding the public of her place in the present crown. But if the future monarchy is trying to create a clearer identity around William and Catherine, then every symbol associated with the current queen must be handled with care. Edward's response, if there is one, appears quieter than any jewel. It is the responsive position, standing close enough to the future to be seen, but not so close that he seems ambitious, remaining loyal to Charles, but not absorbed into the more complicated emotions surrounding Camilla, supporting the institution, while appearing useful to the next chapter rather than merely decorative in the present one. That posture may explain why royal watchers have begun connecting separate events into one pattern. A public appearance here, a notable absence there, a placement near William, a moment where Sophie's visibility changes, and suddenly a larger picture starts to form. None of these pieces alone can prove a hidden plan. But together, they suggest that parts of the family may already be adjusting to the gravitational pull of the next reign. And if that is true, the consequences are serious. Camilla's future role may not be determined by title alone. It may be determined by how easily she can fit into the image William needs to create. If her presence strengthens dignity and continuity, she may remain visible in a respectful way. If her presence revives old tensions or distracts from Catherine's place, the palace may choose distance over sentiment. Every transition requires a quiet reordering of people who once seemed permanent. When one reign ends, the emotional map changes. Former centers of influence become elder figures. Trusted supporters move closer. Those tied too strongly to old controversies are softened, repositioned, or respectfully placed at the edge of the frame. The monarchy survives by making these changes appear natural, even when they are deeply calculated. For William, the calculation will be especially personal. His future reign cannot afford confusion around its central image. The public will want to see clarity. William as king, Catherine as queen, their children as continuity, and a supporting family that appears disciplined, loyal, and calm. Anyone who complicates that image may still be honored, but honor does not always mean proximity. And perhaps that is why the rumor of him blocking Camilla, even if unconfirmed, has gained traction. It feels plausible not because people imagine Edward as aggressive, but because they imagine him as protective. Protective of order. Protective of William's future image. Protective of the monarchy's ability to move forward without being pulled repeatedly into usher around every loyal figure becomes sharper. This is no longer only about who appears at royal events today. It is about who is being trusted to help define the first image of tomorrow.